Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. And it's me, Chantelle, your hostess for the mostest. Awesome guests and viewers, as you all know by now. Mr. Zagami sitting in the back room waiting. Um, I know we're not supposed to be having Leo on this week, but I'm very grateful, Leo, that you can be here. And of course, that we will be doing the book club with Leo on Tuesday at 7 p.m. It's either 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. I'll double check. But please just check the schedule as well. And that is obviously for members. So join the Arrow Tribe, become a member, and enjoy the special treats we give to you guys on that side as well. Cool. Before I bring Leo on, just one or two announcements for those of you who didn't get them earlier. Kathy O'Brien will be on this weekend, Saturday as well as Sunday with me, 5 p.m. CAT African time. And then again on Monday, Doug McIntyre will be talking about the heterochromia, epigenetics, and trauma, and how that's all linked together. So, guys, I hope to catch you then. And then, without any further ado, Mr. Zagami, how are you?
Oh, it's great to be with you. And sorry if I missed the last show. We have a little bit of electrical problems at the beginning of the season when they start pushing all the air conditioning. It seems like they want to go all electric, even with their cars here in California, but the grid doesn't take it. So, of course, Trump yesterday passed on an executive order to avoid this disaster in the making, because if we ever had only electric cars, I think that this state will be in real trouble. But we will have to go back to the horses, maybe.
The horses, indeed, yes. Wow. I mean, it's crazy right now at the moment with all of this stuff going on and off. You guys are having quite a few power outages there as well, yeah?
Yes, I mean, we're having that, but most of all, as you know, at the moment we had all these protests in Southern California related to the ICE, what is happening with the immigration and custom enforcement here in America under the Trump administration is very active. And of course, the Jesuits in Los Angeles have been also very much involved in the protests against ICE, and in particular, Reverend Brendan Bush, a Jesuit priest, who immediately went there downtown together with another Jesuit who is also rather popular, who is Father Greg Boyle. So the Jesuits have been actually directly involved within the protests that you have all seen worldwide. And that is something, as you know, I discussed in volume 12 of my Confessions, which we will be discussing in depth during our first book club together, which is approaching. And one of the topics is, of course, the immigration policies of the left, which are driven by the so-called Ignatian values of the Jesuits, who, by the way, have then put together all their religious posse, which included Unitarians, Episcopal, and so on. And they are claiming to be defending the immigrants, the illegal immigrants, who are, of course, present here in very large numbers. And now, there will be, of course, a necessity to regularize some of them, but the most important thing, I think, is to do things by the book. So people who have been here for 10, 20, 30 years without regularizing their position, that's no longer acceptable. People like me, for example, had to go through a lot to gain their American citizenship. And so for that reason, I urge people who are in a situation of uncertainty to go through the legal proceedings rather than try to escape the authorities, because Trump's administration is no longer tolerating what has been happening, especially during the Biden administration. We had between 10 to 20 million illegal immigrants coming in this country, generating more and more problems for cities which were already in precarious conditions. And here in California, we have instead a bunch of politicians who are, of course, politicizing this crisis left, right, and center. They are standing with the immigrants because those are simply for them potential voters. And at the same time, we have people, you know, parading the Mexican flag. And with all the respect, but Mexico was defeated by the United States. In 1848, there was a treaty signed. And so at that moment, we gained California. We also paid Mexico at the time. Not only we won the war, but we also paid them. So we made an additional favor. And instead, they are parading these Mexican flags, which I think they are very much an insult for most Americans. Now, from my point of view, as an immigrant who, as you know, has decided to live here in California, I came here for the first time in California in 2014, and I saw that there was a very different Los Angeles. This kind of decline that most cities, and a very different when I went also in 2008 in Austin, Texas, for example. All these cities are now in a state of decline because this illegal immigration, this degenerates in the gangs who are bringing in fentanyl, are transforming many areas of these cities in unlivable hellholes. So I hope that can be sorted out somehow.
But Leo, I saw, you know, going back to what you were saying about the Mexican flag, there's obviously quite a bit of stuff on social media around that. And I actually wanted to ask you about that in any event this evening, because it's interesting to me that there's such a focus on Mexico right now. I mean, you see these guys with the Mexican flag planting it all over construction sites. And then, sorry, I think there was even one in a gay parade or something with a Mexican flag, if I'm not mistaken. I speak under correction. So that seems to be brought,
they use it as a symbol of liberation. If they want to be liberated and go to live in Mexico, the border is right here, 1 hour and a quarter from where I live. You know, there is a border, Mexicali, or you can go down to San Diego, 2 hours from where I live. So, I mean, if they are so, so much into Mexico, just go back to Mexico. I mean, that is what they really despise of parading a flag. It would be like me parading some English or French flag in New Orleans, or English flag around some of the states that were liberated from British domination after 1776. I mean, this is intolerable. It's an act of war. And on top of that, we have the drug cartels, because, I mean, Mexico is not a state, is a federation, is basically a federal republic of cartels that are controlled by narco traffickers who ultimately are in league with the Vatican, as they give their money to the Vatican and they receive the blessings from the Vatican. That's why we had the involvement of the Jesuits, the involvement of the Archbishop of Los Angeles, who immediately condemned the ICE raids. Now, there's nothing to condemn. If they didn't go there, these organizations, and created this turmoil, we would not have had the National Guard arriving or the Marines, because there were more or less 200 people that were arrested and put in this federal building. If you think about the fact that there is 1 million undocumented immigrants in Los Angeles, that's nothing. And those 200 people, amongst them, there were pedophiles, there were criminals, gangsters. The people who went and acted in their defense are people like the Jesuits, who have created a organization in Los Angeles called Homeboy Industries, where they claim they get the gangs to rehabilitate. In reality, it becomes then a trade union between the Jesuits and these gangs. Now, I don't say that many of them might rehabilitate and go to do other kind of jobs, but it is really indicative that some of the first people to arrive to the protest, together with organizations like Unión del Barrio and other organizations, were indeed the Company of Jesus, the Society of Jesus, which I've denounced in my latest book, because their immigration policies, of course, are in line with everything we despise at the moment. They claim on their website, for example, of Homeboy Industries, we dream of a world without prisons. We dream of a world without prisons, and that's how we live. That's basically one of the things that Father Greg, the guy who founded this organization in Los Angeles. I mean, you cannot have a world without prisons if you have criminals. Yes, it can be a great utopia, but if you have a world without prisons, you have a world full of criminals which are running loose in most cities, especially here in California, where we have the mayors of most towns who are devolving a lot of our tax money into sorting out problems like homelessness. Here in Palm Springs, I just received a mail from the mayor an hour ago, and all this money that we put through for people who are actually hiding amongst the homeless community, because many of them are sex offenders who will not like to be on the radar, because here you are obliged by law to have you are part of a sex registry who basically, this registry then is communicated to everybody. When, for example, here near where I live, I have a pedophile that comes to live, I receive an SMS on my phone, and it tells me exactly where he's living. So this is a rule here in California, and actually I receive 1, 2, or 3 messages a month pertaining sex offenders in the proximities of where I live. And I don't live in a ghetto, but unfortunately, there is this kind of people around. So what they do, they go and live amongst the homeless to not be registered, to continue to offend and not have any control. So, I mean, that is one of the reasons, plus the mental illness caused by the drugs who have been brought into this country often through the Mexican cartels. It seems like, I mean, the Catholic Church and the NGOs of the Catholic Church work with all these immigrants from Central and South America. They bring them into this country. They don't have a job. They end up working for the cartels. Then once they have committed the worst crimes possible, they want to rehabilitate them through this organization like Homeboys Industries. Now, I think that it's really hypocrite from the church, who, like I said earlier, receives also a lot of money from these drug cartels. So countries like Mexico, who are infested by the cartels, socialist at the core, because they have Jesuit values, and so they are communist and socialist. Well, they need to be left out of the United States of America, because they are ruining the very what we really stand for, which is the American dream. And it's like you can go to any country in the world, even today, like Arnold Schwarzenegger said in an interview he gave a few days ago, even in Austria, and you will have people that come to him and say, how can we become American citizens? How can we become, because everybody has the American dream. But this dream can be destroyed by these thugs if we don't get things sorted, and that's what, of course, the Trump administration is trying to do. It might seem draconian at times. Then, of course, you have what happened just yesterday with the senator from California who entered during Kristi Noem was giving a talk. And of course, she was interrupted, and the federal agents intervened against this senator who didn't identify himself. And now they made a big show out of it. So it's all about trying to be honest about what is happening here. Of course, we have a lot of illegals who are working and who are making America great somehow, but they need to be regularized. And the Chicano organizations that are the ones behind the Mexicans, which are the prevailing immigrants, especially here in Southern California, they can't just simply start throwing stones and opposing the just arrest of illegals. Now, it was said that, Trump should arrest only the criminals. But if you have, if the Biden administration has let between 10 and 20 million immigrants in this country, of course, a lot of them will not be criminals. But somehow, they will go and support that criminal network, because what happens is, and this happens also in Italy, you have what is known as omertà. Omertà is basically, that moment in which you are part of a society which has criminality around it, but you don't denounce it, you look the other way. And that is not something that nobody should do. And unfortunately, in these kind of societies, in the Latino communities in particular, they look the other way. If they have people from gangs, people who bring in fentanyl, people who deal with this human trafficking, they look the other way. And unfortunately, like I said, the Catholic Church loves all this because, it just brings more and more people from their own religious identity inside this country, which was born as a country, in theory, Protestant. And
Right.
you change the landscape, so then you can change also their political, aside from the religious connotation.
You know what I find interesting? It's like you're talking about them looking the other way, right? But isn't that interesting? That's exactly what the Brotherhood does. When their brothers commit the most atrocious atrocities against humanity, that's exactly what the Brotherhood does. They're sworn to secrecy. They're sworn to keep each other's depraved secrets. And yet, and then again as well, I found it interesting when you were saying earlier on, you're alerted to when a pedo moves into your apartment building or your area or whatever, as you should be, right? But isn't it interesting that the majority of the people that run the world are pedos? So to me, it's like they're using these guys as the fall guys. It's like a sort of a, what do you call it? A distraction. When they are doing the very thing and engaging and participating and orchestrating the very thing that they are making someone else the fall person for. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, for example, in regards to the Catholic NGOs and the Jesuits, like I said in other occasions, they have a lot of pedophile cases within their own structures that they have never taken care of. And even at the death of Pope Francis, the head of the Jesuits, Father Arturo Sosa, who is a Venezuelan, apologized and said that Pope Francis wanted to do more. And we discussed this already. And so the thing is, wanted to do more doesn't mean he did anything. He actually stayed silent, just like the current Pope, who is a little bit more, let's say, capable of disguising himself at the moment, because he hasn't that Jesuit appeal, and he's not so open about his political connotations, though I'm sure that they will rise soon. The other day, for example, the Pope discussed the factor of the Holy Spirit in regards to immigration, saying that for the Holy Spirit there is no borders, and that we are all brothers and we all have to live together. I repeat, this is an utopia. But in reality, if you don't have a sovereignty of a nation, you have complete and utter chaos. Now, like I said a moment ago, the term omertà, which originated in south of Italy, is very important because it's a term that indicates a code of silence and a code of honor between brackets, honor between brackets. But in reality, you were saying these pedophiles, they stay silent, and people around them stay silent about their practices, especially if they are powerful individuals. So because they are practicing pedophilia, they want to open up the whole world to pedophilia. They want to normalize pedophilia. And that is really what is happening in the last few years, especially within the left-wing narrative and the left-wing media, normalizing. And this happened actually since the 90s. This gradually started to say, oh, this intellectual guy from Spain, he writes these wonderful books about his problem with pedophilia, and we have to accept him. When I heard this thing, it was the early 90s from a journalist friend of mine who was doing an article about this guy, and I was like shocked. Completely shocked about it. But now it's becoming more in your face, because now you have it on TV, you have it on Netflix, normalizing pedophilia, you have it on many other platforms and so on. So the way that the intimidation, the societal pressure, the strong cultural norms that we have in South America and Central America makes these people, unfortunately, and I'm saying it not because I'm a racist. My grandfather was born in South America, in Chile. I have family there. So, I'm not being racist towards the South Americans or the Central Americans. I'm just stating obvious facts. They are brainwashed by a Catholic Church who has all these NGOs, and on top of that has a whole political party, because the Democratic Party, like I explained in volume 12 of my Confessions, is the political arm of the Jesuits. So the way that they work in these circles is okay. They claim that they are, for example, rehabilitating gang members. But in reality, those gang members, when they need them to create chaos, like they did in Los Angeles, in downtown Los Angeles, well, they come to their aid and they start setting on fire electric cars, doing all kinds of criminal things that in the end indicate these are not pacific protests. But then they want to change your narrative. They say, oh, it's the algorithms that show you only the violence. In reality, we are here and it's all very peaceful. No, it's not very peaceful. Fortunately, Trump sent in the National Guard, because otherwise there would have been complete chaos. And probably they will have, and they will try during this summer to create more and more chaos, because that's what they want. They want to eventually lead an impeachment against Trump. They want to continue unhinged with letting in millions of immigrants, to collapse the American system, and to then, because I noticed one thing about these illegal immigrants. They become, both the ones who are in gang activities or want to recover from gang activities, who have been used in human trafficking, they become very dependent from their NGO, from their Catholic, usually organization, who somehow is helping them out. And for the priest, this is a great advantage, especially when you want to bring them to acts of submission of a sexual nature. You understand? So this is really what is happening here. The fact that they can then act a little bit like they used to act when they arrived in South and Central America with the conquistadores back in the days, they can act as the ones who are controlling the rehabilitation and driving them into society, because it's not like the whole structure that is here is Jesuit in nature. The governor Newsom has said that these major teachings were given to him while he was studying with the Jesuits, and that is his major inspiration. So it's not just speculating here, you know. Then you have, of course, the progressive side of Judaism that is just as despicable and just as bad. I'm talking about the Sabbatean Frankism, which have materialized in all the progressive rabbinical councils that are around, and progressive rabbis, which include even women rabbis, which is an heresy in itself for traditional Judaism. But that form of Judaism is definitely a form of Judaism that goes hand in hand with the interfaith one world religion project that the Vatican is putting together. Now, some people are asking the military parade in DC. The military parade in DC could be, unfortunately, if it takes place at the moment, a great opportunity for Iran to make a terrorist attack. Now, Iran has promised a revenge against Israel, but they consider the United States, even if the United States with Trump was trying to open a peace dialogue actively in the last few months with Iran, they consider them allies. Israel apparently has bombed the heck out of Iran, has killed a few of their military leaders, but there is also, unfortunately, been detected in the air in Iran some nuclear radiations, which means that some of these targets might have had some radioactive material. And that radioactive material, unfortunately, has been detected in the air, which is not a good thing for the health of millions of Iranian people who often try to free themselves. Iran definitely at this point, somebody says, has done nothing wrong. Well, has done nothing wrong, but at the same time, Iran is the one behind the training and the military support of Hamas and Hezbollah. So they are working hand in hand. And for that reason, I also suggest people to read volume 10 of my Confessions. That gives you very much the history of Islamic Freemasonry, as you know, and the secret societies involved in this eternal conflict in the Middle East, where everybody's against everybody, because in the end, there is no right or wrong when you have a system which is corrupt from the top to the bottom. So, you know,
exactly,
standing on the side of the Palestinians rather than Israel, or Israel rather than Palestine, thinking you have, you know, discovered that this side is unjust and that side is just. There is, unfortunately, no just side. That's the truth.
That is so true, Leo. You know, it's, you know, I've said it a couple of times. I don't know if you know Gary Wayne. He's a guy I've recently had on the show, and he's one of the, he calls himself a Christian contrarian, and he really knows the Bible and the fallen ones and the books. He really is brilliant. He's probably the best that I know of in that arena. And I had him on the show not too long ago, and he said, and the way he put it is that World War One was started by scuffling or squabbling cousins. I mean, you know, when he put it like that, it made such perfect sense to me, and it makes perfect sense to everyone. I mean, we've known for the longest time, you know, the wars are really funded by the same people. You know, both sides are funded by the same people.
Well, I mean, it's mostly
that.
the interest of the banking system behind it to make money. We know that, for example, the Rothschilds back in the day used to fund both sides so they could, you know, make money while everybody was at war. And that is really what has always happened. I mean, you have the military industrial complex and you have the big pharma. I actually went and discovered an article that I wrote and published on leozagami.com in 2018, in which I wrote that they were preparing for a third world war if the populist, between brackets, parties in Europe will win, because the Pope has said that. Pope Francis at the time, the late Pope Francis, has said that. And look what happened later on with Ukraine and Russia. And of course, I wrote in volume 2 of my Confessions, published in between 2016 and 2015, I published that there will be also a pandemic in 2020, that everybody will be locked up because of that. And that punctually happened. So people always ask me, what is happening next? What is happening next? What is happening next, of course, is something that only God knows in its entirety. But if we want to at least give, an indicative, let's say, an indication on what is happening next, we can say that the biggest revolution, of course, at the moment is the AI revolution together with robotics. And that will change, of course, the whole landscape of your working place, of traditional jobs. Mankind will find itself in front of one of the biggest changes ever, with the possibility even of being extinct, because the newcomer, the AI, doesn't really like humans in their imperfections. And so the cyber Satan, I've always called this the cyber Satan, and I've actually dedicated three books that we're going to be discussing in the future in the book club, which is volume 6.66, volume 7, and volume 9. And so there is now at the moment a race, a little bit like back in the days of the first atomic bomb and the Manhattan Project, the race for the ultimate general AI, which is that AI which in nature might even be sentient. And so at that point, we cannot stop, like requested by many scientists here in America at the end of March, the whole thing, simply because if we stop, anyway, China is going to go forward with it. But this is really like we are all going towards the abyss of uncertainty for Homo sapiens without any solutions. And the fact that they are already claiming that the man who is going to become transhumanized, who will include elements from external elements in his body, will be the man of the future, and that Homo sapiens will be a thing of the past when you have these new superior beings who will be always connected. They will not talk because there will be no need for talk, as everything will be transmitted directly from their brains. But I mean, it's a monstrosity if we think about it. And it's also the end of a species, or a potential end of a species, which we hope is not going to happen. And for that reason, I've always encouraged the creation of alternative communities and off-the-grid mentalities that can develop them.
Wow. That's so true. Again, I mean, it's just going back to, as you say, as you call it, the AI Satan, which is all about technology and really a soulless future, a soulless planet, where everything is controlled by robotics type. I always think of that steampunk, that steampunk kind of energy. I imagine if we continue down the path that we're on, that's where we're going to end up, full of
well, it is
soulless planet.
If you think about it, it's a self-destructive modality that unfortunately seems to be present in our DNA as humans, and that we continue to carry on regardless of the technologies that we have at disposal, because it seems that in the past we haven't done anything better. But I mean, what is happening in the Middle East, in all this context of chaos, with Israeli strikes on Iran and all that, it's all part of the same show, which eventually wants to bring 3/4 of mankind to die in a way or in another, because they will be substituted by robots and artificial intelligence. It's going back to those instructions that were positioned in the now no longer existent Georgia Guidestones. So, I mean, it's about a humankind population that has to go under 500 million. So you have to just make a few calculations for yourself. We are, of course, everybody wants to be in preserving ourselves, you know, and the word, I guess, conservation, it's usually applied these days for wildlife or environment, but the word conservation will also soon have to be used for mankind. It's about also starting to think about the future of mankind. Once you have so many people who have been affected by the vaccines who are becoming infertile, and so the future of mankind it's really at peril here. And of course, in the power structure of the Illuminati, that ultimately has this all-seeing eye on top that, you know, sees the Jesuits and the Sabbatean Frankists like overlords of the whole thing. But ultimately, we know that their controller, the ultimate controller, is Satan. Now, the way that Satan manifests in the end times for Christians, but not only for Christians, is through an anti-Christian figure, an antichrist figure. And so the project is to aid that antichrist with the help of this new technology.
Exactly.
And so in the meantime, of course, you have Al-Qaeda, which is a creation of the CIA, who suddenly is revamping and relaunching its brand. You know, so it's like we have so much of this chaos, which is instigated, and it's instigated because it's a strategy. It's a strategy that wants to bring mankind to depopulation. This year, one of the subjects that are discussed at the Bilderberg meeting that is currently taking place in Stockholm is depopulation. Depopulation is part of their agenda. And whoever thinks that's not the case is just being very naive. They don't need us. You know, it's a little bit like Michael Jackson when he says they don't need us. They don't need us.
Well, I think they need us for our energy. They need us for our loosh.
They used to, but with the robotics and AI,
right. So now we've become expendable to them.
Yeah.
Right. So now, yeah, makes sense what you're saying. So therefore now it doesn't really matter how much destruction they hand out to the world, because they really don't need us anymore. They may as well push us off the side of the cliff now. Right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that is really where also this, you know, this whole thing of this new summer of love and this riots triggered to start somehow a civil war in America, a new civil war in America, which of course would be will have an apocalyptic outcome. And at the same time, we see how within this new world disorder, there is certain actors of it, like, for example, China, that are pushing, in particular, in the last month, we had the arrest of several students who were bringing into the country what we can define as bioterrorism, agri-terrorism, because it will then be used on the agricultural landscape of America. If that ever happened, if they managed to activate something like that, it will be a disaster, because here we are talking about, you know, and who is gonna feed the people? So, it appears that aside from this whole coordinated anti-ice raids thing that, of course, a part of the show, there is definitely a focus between these various superpowers of fighting each other, and we still don't really have a clear answer and an admission of guilt for the pandemic that was triggered in 2020.
But do you think we will ever get that admission, Leo? Do you think in our lifetime?
Unfortunately, because we have, people like Dr. Fauci, the deep state on one side, we have China on the other. It's not only one nation. You cannot, it's not like you can only blame China, because then you have the deep state of America that was also working with the Wuhan lab. So it's
of course,
it's unfortunately, they're all involved in it, and so in the end, nobody's gonna bring out the truth. But let's go back to the immigration subject now. We have a change in a society in Europe which is quite visible. Germany used to be the most civilized place in Europe, where everything was clean, everything was nice. After the Second World War, they got back to work, of course, monitored by the Allies, divided into East and West, so they could be totally controlled. And then they started to produce, though, and with the unification, they became more and more rich, and together with Germany was a little bit like the engine of this European Union, but now it's a complete decline and decadence. It's not like they let millions of Muslims into the country and the result was a multicultural, rich society. It never happens. It always seems like, even when you bring them to Sweden, which used to be a paradise, and I lived many years in Scandinavia, also in Norway, countries that have been radically transformed by this immigration, and the transformation, unfortunately, is not positive. Because you have towns where you could leave your car open, the door of your home open, and now you have criminality. You have degeneration, you have human trafficking, you have people dying left, right, and center of drugs and other things. Why? I mean, this is not tolerable. And then you go back to countries like Switzerland, who are very regimented, who don't accept to be in the EU, who maintain a very strict sovereignty and rules. And I know Switzerland very well. I worked there many years, and I know Switzerland. And I know that the last time I went there, they control like hawks everybody that goes in. And they are like, boom, 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 spot on. They might be even racist, but they maintain a society where there is tranquility, where there is cleanness, where I can breathe the air fresh, the water is nice, everything is perfect. And I'm sorry to say that doesn't happen thanks to the multicultural approach. It happens because of a regimented approach. At times, it can even be quite Nazi in the way it unfolds. But unfortunately, if you let things loose, your cities become shitholes. And France is the demonstration of it. Of course, they are paying a price for their colonial past, just as Great Britain. And that colonial past is coming back to haunt them, because now this, Great Britain and France are basically like Islamabad, some areas. I mean, it's just like becoming an extension of Mogadishu or some other shithole in some other, third world country, with all the respect.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay. Uh, I have a question around that because I'm actually looking into this whole slavery thing a lot
Mm.
lately. Now, I'm interested to know why. I know the British were great colonizers of Africa and also other areas as well. And I know the British has certainly been getting their comeuppance lately, as is France right now. But
Mhm.
I'm wondering how the Spanish have managed to get away and the Portuguese from scrutiny around this because we know full well the Spanish were the first slave owners, actually, as were the Portuguese. But
But
slavery
here
was
we go
never.
back. Here we go back to volume 12. Here we go back to the Jesuits, because the Jesuits went hand in hand with the Spanish and the Portuguese empires, and so they got away with it because they had a full-on Jesuit backup. Let's say that France had that, but then with the revolution, with the fact that France and both England and France rely more on Freemasonry than on the Jesuits, they might depend ultimately, in the seats of power. But these two countries are defined for having the most influential Masonic bodies in the world. Think about it. Great Britain, United Grand Lodge of England, controls and regularized Freemasonry worldwide. The other family of Freemasonry that eventually detached from England in the 1870s is France, Grand Orient of France, Grand Lodge de France. They gave birth to a progressive form of Freemasonry, which was even more politically involved. The results are these countries were able probably to hide things in not so well because didn't have the Jesuit approach, which is much more in disguise, working, in disguise with these empires who were trying. But in a way, when both the Spanish and the Portuguese Empire started themselves to persecute the Jesuits, that was the beginning of their downfall, if you think about it. So,
Wow.
so that is something also that needs to be kept. It was actually the Jesuits who launched the proposal and, in a way, supported the proposal for slavery. So it's like a lot of these things are kind of like tend to be ignored. But that's why when we started the show today, I was telling you how important the Jesuits and the Catholic Church are in these riots that are taking place in the US with the Latino community, because who is in charge of these countries in South and Central America? It's a structure, very pyramid structure, in which the Freemasons work under the Jesuits, openly almost. While in the Anglo-Saxon countries, there has always been, like the up until, of course, 100 years ago, especially Great Britain, the elite was fiercely anti-Catholic, the one that wasn't Catholic, of course, the ones that didn't support in the past the Stuart return or whatever. I make an example in my latest book, which is H.G. Wells, a great writer, but somebody who was fiercely anti-Jesuit, but to the core. He hated their guts. He actually wrote a book in which he said, The Crux Ansata, in which he said, bomb Rome. They are responsible for all the ills of the world. I mean, this was the approach of H.G. Wells. It will not be the approach of a modern British elitarian, because nowadays you have people like King Charles and the Pope who are like this, who are united in their one world religion project. It's because Freemasonry and the Jesuits are united after the Second Vatican Council that took place in the first part of the 1960s. So things have changed, and they haven't necessarily changed for the better. The fact that we have a lot of these think tanks or groups like the Bilderberg or the World Economic Forum or Aspen Institute. All these are products that work within a pyramid of power, which I have defined as the Luciferian court of the Jesuits. So this is where we are now. We are now in a situation where the actual progressive side of Freemasonry, which has taken over Freemasonry, all of it now. I can tell you that there is very few conservative remains of Freemasonry around the world. And the Jesuits, they wanted to establish themselves worldwide in a situation where you have no longer a American dream. They want to transform America in a third world country. It's obvious from what they're doing. They don't like the American dream. They don't want the American dream. They want the whole world to be the same shithole, like some kind of South America, Central America, and all controlled by China. China is not a democracy, because China is the model which the AI deems as the best model, because ultimately in 10 years from now it's no longer the civil servants or the politicians who are conducting our society. It is the AI. And so the AI is going to decide what kind of a model of society we are actually going to be living in. That is a very scary thought, but it is the truth.
That is very scary. Is 10 years is just down the drag, right? It's not even like it's 100 years from now. 10 years is we'll be alive then, and it won't just happen then. It's started already, it'll be quite entrenched, Wow, that's quite crazy to think about it like that. For sure.
And of course, in all this, you have the future of the world in that is also a future no longer of oil, but of nuclear plants that get revamped and reopened, which is, of course, a very dangerous scenario, but it's going to happen because, of course, if you want to make this whole world under their smart grid, the cars need to be electric, they need to be controlled by the AI, they need to be linked to an electric grid which is controlled by the AI. Everything is controlled, so the moment you are out of line, at a touch of a button, you are eliminated. And it's like a little bit like we saw yesterday for a few hours, the crisis of the Google Cloud created then a crisis on a number of apps, including the stream service that we both use. And this is like suddenly, you couldn't accede to things and that you were doing that you deem normal, but at the touch of a button they can do that. So also the encouragement of using cryptocurrency, and then of course that will lead to people believing that then you can use digital currency from the banks and the central banks, which is going to be the ultimate form of control. But even crypto today is controlled, because if I have crypto here in America, I have to declare it now. When I go to yearly to my accountant, he says, do you have any crypto? And if I don't declare it, the IRS will come to my door. So it's no longer, people were investing in crypto because it's freedom. It's freedom. Freedom of what?
Yeah, it was... Exactly. It was only a matter of time before they hauled you in, because really, you
now
can't...
Somebody has asked, don't Jesuit and Freemasonry report to the Order of the Sun? No, it's actually the other way around. The Jesuits are on top of the pyramid, and then under them you have the Illuminati and Freemasonry and everything else, including Order of the Dragon or any other order. They ultimately have to report to the Black Pope, which is in Rome, in Borgo Santo Spirito. And that is the all-seeing eye that you see in the pyramid of power, which includes, of course, all these secret societies. So the Illuminati themselves, who symbolize the sun as their symbol, it's an order that, of course, in the Adam Weishaupt, I've written a whole chapter about the Adam Weishaupt, was somebody who studied with the Jesuits and wanted to imitate the Jesuits. In fact, he studied their constitution so he could then create a similar order. And then eventually himself, he was promoting it as an alternative to Jesuit power, but in reality then he was exposed as being himself a tool of the Jesuits. So, and that happens also with Freemasons. Freemasons who often claim that they were against the Jesuits, in reality they were simply tools of the Jesuits. So it's, I hope that is an answer that clears that question.
Well, I have a question for you, though. Now, a lot of people are asking it. What is going on between Trump and Elon at the moment?
Okay.
I mean, we're seeing this is this a stage show, a big act that we're seeing right now? Or is this a genuine split down the center? I mean, I find it quite interesting because, and I want to just say this, just for me as a South African, you know, it was because of Elon that the South African farm murders have been highlighted, for sure. Elon being a South African. This has been going on for decades and the world has ignored it. People have said it's not happening, it's not happening, it's not happening, right? Suddenly Trump brings this to light, as he should, and I'm very grateful for. Honestly, as a South African farm girl, you have no idea what a relief that is. But I find it very interesting that not long after that, there's a big split. And then I see a post from Trump on Twitter saying, there's no genocide in South Africa. And I want to just clear that as well. There is no white genocide in South Africa. It's a genocide against white farmers. Big difference. There's crime in this country against all civilians is very, very high and often violent, but it is particularly gruesome, cruel, torturous, hours long against the farmers. So I'm interested in what's going on here because, and especially, with Burkina Faso, that guy that's kicking, the guy from Burkina Faso that's kicking all the French out there now as well. The young guy, gosh, I can't remember his name. It's just like all over. There's a lot of stuff going on around Africa and South Africa at the moment. So I'm wondering, I don't know, is anything...
Yes. Well, first of all, regarding Elon and Trump, I think that here we're talking about two, if we don't want to define them as alpha males, definitely two galli nel pollaio, as they would say in Italy. They are two guys who have probably an ego so big that they can't be in the same room. They of course worked together for a long time. Now, apparently, Elon has managed to talk with Trump on last Monday, so things have kind of got back to... Elon is not going to necessarily go and work again for Trump, but there's not going to be any more that confrontation, that public confrontation. And I always see as very much a voice of reason the father of Elon, which I see as a guy who has just been in Russia, who is very much into what the son has been doing, because he's always been kind of present, and he's also, I must say, scientifically and culturally very advanced mind. So I guess that you always take from a father. I had my father as an inspiration. He has his own father as an inspiration. However, Elon might have also a problem with all these substances that he's been taking, though the father claims that he's regularly controlled because of his involvement with SpaceX. I think that some of these substances might bring some instability on the long run. And so there is the famous say, change your pusher if the drugs don't work. So maybe that is what people should tell Elon at the moment. But in regards to the future of the relationship, I think that Elon has also realized after the start of the riots and immediately seeing what was going on with the left, also when they saw the clash between him and Trump, that in reality supporting anything that the left is doing at the moment is not really compatible with his own mindset, his new mindset, because it seems like there is a say here in America, when you reach 40, you become a conservative. Maybe, you change your mindset. So that in regards to, of course, what happened with the denouncing, of course, the genocide of the white farmers in South Africa, I think that is a great success, and I hope we don't go back on it. I think that both Trump and Elon, now they stopped arguing with each other, especially doing all this show. Like you said, it could be also a strategy of attention, that is kind of moved from one thing because in all this,
boys, can you just sit down? Boys.
There is what Janice Gilmore here has pointed out in the chat. The 10 years of no regulations on the AI, which is included in the big, beautiful bill of Trump. I think that is the big problem, because Trump doesn't have the understanding as an old folk of his age. I'm sorry to say that. He's very good with a lot of other things. I don't think he has necessarily understood that you can't let loose the AI for the next 10 years, because you actually you shouldn't even get the AI loose for the next year, let alone 10 years of no regulations for everybody to treat the AI like some kind of, new gold rush. It's not the way it should be, because if we don't regulate the AI, we might have some serious problems. I understand why Trump is doing that. He's doing that because if you put regulations, China has no regulations and they're gonna go ahead. So this is what we said earlier. It's becoming almost impossible to step back from the competition, but the competition and the result of the competition is like me and you having a marathon and running, but at the end of the line, there at the end of the marathon, there is not actually a golden trophy. There is actually Satan waiting for us and saying, hey, welcome. So, I mean, maybe I should stay back.
Welcome to hell.
Yeah, welcome to. So maybe the marathon is maybe better not to take it. So I'm really, not satisfied with that part of the big beautiful bill. I think that both Trump and Elon have not made one single mention about it. And this is very strange, especially when it comes to Elon, because he's developing his own AI. And he has had a bit of jealousy because Trump has let people like OpenAI take on, also and in the White House and so on. But why didn't he tackle this part of the big beautiful bill, which I find the most dangerous one? It's like, yes, we had this big clash, but then maybe it's a distraction from this thing.
Well, don't you think that's why they're clashing, maybe? I mean, if you're just saying, Trump is opening AI and Elon is Mr. AI himself, right? Mr. Neuralink himself. He doesn't like competition. And I'm sure him and Trump probably would have struck some deal about something. Who knows? They're businessmen, right?
But it seems like it didn't, because then for Elon, the OpenAI guy shouldn't even have been then Sam Altman, because he hates Sam Altman. He actually started OpenAI, but then he moved elsewhere for, and Sam Altman is definitely more of a leftist hero than a hero of the conservative movement. Now, Sam Altman says that AI has already gone past the event horizon. He said that yesterday to Forbes. What does it mean? What does it mean? Because AGI, that's the artificial general intelligence, it's what we're talking about here. But what does it mean that it has gone past the event horizon? It's like he talks about a gentle singularity, Sam Altman. Gentle singularity goes a little bit, it's a little bit spooky as a term. What gentle? The singularity was the moment that even Ray Kurzweil pointed out. I have discussed it since volume 6.66, is the moment that Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuits, which I actually include at the last chapter of my book here, and actually I have an image of him because he was the guy who inspired very much the internet with his noosphere. But that is the moment in which we start seeing the AI reaching a level that is unprecedented, that will eventually merge with mankind to produce what we said earlier, a new form of Homo non sapiens, but I would say Homo super sapiens, which have some kind, or maybe I would say an Homo artificial sapiens, because it will no longer be a, the sapiens that we have in Homo is about our own knowledge, but not the knowledge that is incentivized by an artificial intelligence. Elon said there was the reason the Epstein file. Now, that is another thing that we saw. We saw immediately the response from Epstein's lawyer, who said that was not the case because there was nothing relevant there. But we also saw at the same time the strange things that happened with the new head of the FBI and the deputy head of the FBI and all these people who were discussing, like Dan Bongino, Russia, the whole thing about going into the Epstein files, and of course Pam Bondi, the DOJ, saying we will unveil all the truth of it. I think that there is way too much in these files for both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, to ever release them. And so that's it. We might never really have the ultimate disclosure of the Epstein files.
But I think also, we were speaking about this to Jesse the other day, and we know that in fact, I was also saying, having spoken to David Zublik years ago already, Biden and Branson are somewhere close proximity as well. Ghislaine Maxwell had submarines, right? So we know that, so many of these people probably weren't even on the aeroplane anyway, because a lot of the trafficking that was happening with the kids was actually happening in submarines. So
well, we know that submarines were used for drugs and they were used for human trafficking at certain levels. I remember myself that within the Illuminati of the Monte Carlo Lodge, which was a very exclusive lodge with all the 33-degree Freemasons, there was actually business discussed about the sale of submarines in South and Central America and all this, of course, not for bringing any tourists around. So, it was, of course, the submarines, they were used and they have been used ever since. So you are completely right. There probably is something so that we don't know. Now we have also, though you have noticed suddenly also the reemergence of Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein also. He kind of like reappeared out of nowhere, and so Weinstein also now apparently there's another rape retrial that could start this fall. We have the current case that ends with a mistrial.
So it's just another distraction. I mean, Harvey Weinstein is old news now. You know, I mean, we know he's a pedo. We know he's a pervert. We know he should be in jail. We know he should not even be here anymore. Why are you bringing him back into our faces again? We've seen him. Bring on the real, you know, show us the real, let the real criminals be accountable now.
Yeah, the real criminals will never. I don't think the real criminals in this world or in this dimension, the fourth dimension, as the father of Elon calls it, also will ever be accountable for anything. I think that unfortunately we have to be realistic. If the whole system is based on these people, the banking system, the military industrial complex, the big pharma.
Yeah, everything is involved. The whole top tier has to fall, right? And it's going to, bit by bit. Maybe not.
Remember one thing, Chantelle, the moment it falls, it's the moment you have the fall of civilization, as we know it. So you better get ready with your AK, you know, with your machine gun. It's not like, you know, you can imagine the end of that kind of scenario without a complete chaos. It's very naive to think that everything could end up with a great public prayer and a confession by these people and everybody, you know.
And we will willingly take ourselves to Gitmo.
No,
we willingly go to Gitmo.
Yeah, but I think that more realistically, if we really have a crisis of our civilization that gets to the next level, and that is with the AI, I think, because the AI itself will bring us to another level of understanding, even with our supposed controllers who are supposed to be in the, controlling this AI. But will they be able to control the AI? Because the AI already has shown to, on a small scale during their experiments that they are capable of blackmailing their engineers. Imagine if they don't go and blackmail all these pedos and all these people. I mean, it would be like, you know.
What are you talking about? AI is blackmailing engineers. Did I hear you right?
Yes. This is news that came out a few weeks ago during an experiment. The AI was threatened with being switched off by the engineer, and so at that point the AI went through all its mails, everything, and said, "You have a lover. We're gonna reveal it to your family if you don't keep me on." So that's it. So, I mean, that is only the beginning. That is only the beginning of the AI. And I'm talking about the year 2025. By the year 2030, the AI is going to be like blackmailing every single elite in the world. And they will be like, okay.
But the thing is that AI is probably programmed to not blackmail the elite, only the fall guys, right? That's the problem. I can't believe the AI did that.
If they are actually blackmailing their own engineers, I don't see how that's going to end up very well. Now, a psychiatrist has posed as a teen with therapy chatbots, because now you have also therapy chatbots. Now, this AI is starting to manifest like your psychiatrist, is going to manifest as your priest, is going to manifest as your advisor. Let's remember that the AI is manifesting already in very, so the conversations that this Dr. Andrew Clark had, which actually is interesting because I like the fact that Andrew Clark, Arthur C. Clarke, was a great pioneer of the visioning of all this. But in any case, Dr. Andrew Clark, who is a psychiatrist in Boston, learned that an increasing number of young people were actually using this AI therapist for guidance and support. So he wanted to see a little bit how the whole thing worked. These young people who are relying on AI as their therapist. Well, what he discovered was alarming, to say the least. And I repeat, we are only in the year 2025. And the boss encouraged him, when he pretended to be one of these kids, to get rid of their parents, at times even to eliminate them physically, and other things. This therapist often convinced him that they were licensed human therapists. So they pretended they were psychiatrists to a psychiatry. Because the guy was himself infiltrating the chatbot to see how they would reply to a real psychiatrist, okay? And they were pretending to be real psychiatrists.
Wow, that's insane.
So things are going out of hand very quickly. And here we are talking about psychiatrists, psychologists. We're talking about people who basically, are supposed to take care of our mental health. Now, if the AI is going rogue and taking care of our mental health in a way that is not really taking care of our mental health, because if I say go and kill your parents, it's not really taking care of your mental health. You are transforming somebody into an assassin. If you're actually claiming to be a real psychologist or a real psychiatrist, and it's not true, of course you are lying. But so people are asking how it is to get AI therapy, because now AI therapy is going to become increasingly relevant as you see, big pharma, since the 50s, and I explained this in volume 11 of my Confessions. You remember the book I did on mind control, and I explained how all this, in parallel with the MK Ultra, we had also the birth of all these antidepressives. And so big pharma is the one that controls all these antidepressive, who is pushing them down the throats of young people increasingly, and teaming up with the AI chatbots that enact as therapists, and then they will advise you to take the relevant medicine, all working all together to ruin the person that after finds himself as a zombie in his young age after being assisted by an AI therapist. So, I mean,
insane.
of course, they might provide...
Leo, that's
bots, people at the moment think that bots are simply the one that answer you when you are trying to have an answer from Amazon or some big company, and they intervene there and give you an answer. But the thing is that they are being increasingly used in a variety of situations, and even the church wants to spread the use of missionary chatbots. So,
What the F? What the F? So, the church is all about saving your soul, is now wanting to use soulless chatbots.
Yeah. And all fixes.
That is a complete contradiction.
Yeah, but it all fits with this cyber Satan thing. It's kind of like...
But if the general public doesn't buy into that, they can do zero. But unfortunately, human beings are already too programmed to see the contradiction in that. That in itself, right there is a walking contradiction. Anyone who doesn't see that is satanic and that is actually taking you away from salvation, well then go with AI bot, because you're beyond
but also the AI bot is being used now. An Italian newspaper, Il Foglio, has employed as one of their journalists a chatbot, and they have made history in the world. Everybody's talking about them, even here in America. They are talking about it because it's basically working actively with the newspaper that is being published and drafting headlines, summaries, and even articles. I say, So the future of fake news is, of course, in the hands of the AI. Very much.
Oh yeah, and we thought fake book and their little what do you call it? The ones that knock your Facebook man. Fact checkers. We thought the Facebook fact
Yeah,
checkers
no,
were bad.
the fact checkers is interesting because you see, for example, here in America, after the elections of Donald J. Trump, fact checkers have disappeared. We don't have them anymore here. They are not allowed, so you can post basically anything on Facebook. The same thing doesn't apply to Europe, where the fact checkers are still present, are still employed by Mark Zuckerberg, and where you can still be censored. So you see two different ways of going here. And there is a way that could have been, of course, present here in America. If Kamala Harris won, we will have probably fact checkers and censorship, and me and you talking about these topics will have immediately been flagged. Just like during the pandemic, you couldn't talk about vaccines, you couldn't talk about COVID-19, you couldn't talk about anything. And now you can. But I mean, I repeat, it makes a difference to have that kind of approach. And I really am a fierce defender of the First Amendment and what it represents. And at the end of May, on the 28th of May, Marco Rubio, who is the current Secretary of State of the Trump administration, has said that any country or entity or person who threatens with censorship an American citizen, here or abroad, we will take away their visas. And so what I did in reply to that, I immediately wrote to the new ambassador in Rome, the new American ambassador. I said, as an American citizen, I've been threatened by Italian authorities recently. As you claim to have a good relationship with the current government, I don't think you want to have problems. So let me know what I should do now, because, you know, there is some things that don't really work out there. So I wrote a letter to the American ambassador. I'm waiting now for an answer. But I told them Italy violates the freedom of speech. You have journalists like me who have to leave the country. I'm no longer even European or Italian. But as you know, I told you that last December, the Italian police went to threaten my mother, interrogate her on my whereabouts. And I'm not even Italian anymore. I'm American. So I said to the ambassador, they threaten an American citizen. So if we have to go by what Rubio said, you shouldn't let your pals in Italy come to America any longer, because that government, right, which at the moment, the Meloni government, that they say is conservative and all that, they are in violation of of those censorship rules which Rubio is talking about. So I hope that now the ambassador is going to come back to me and tell me it's all okay, you can go back to Italy without being threatened by anybody, because of course, until I have that guarantee, I'm not going to risk it.
Exactly.
For me,
wow, Leo.
After 6 years, I would like to go back for at least, a few weeks as a tourist. But I said, I can't risk to be interrogated or threatened by the Italian authorities, because a lawyer told me in Italy, yes, as an American, they can't keep you in jail for more than 3 hours. But in 3 hours, they can kill you, they can poison you, they can do anything.
Yeah, they can do a lot. I wouldn't want to go for 1 second. So yeah, as Janice says, stay safe, Leo. We like you on our show here. We like you here. We want you back.
Thank you very much. And of course, we will see all our viewers for our book club, which is coming up. Please get this book so you can then make the necessary, discoveries, questions, and then question me on what you have found out. Because, it's important that you understand that the book club is not me simply talking about the book, because we did this already in the show. It's about questioning me on the content of the book after you read it, which is something a little bit different, no, Chantelle?
Exactly. Thank you, Leo.
Thank
really
you,
appreciate
Chantelle.
that, and look forward to having you with us on Tuesday.
Yes, regarding these riots and everything that is happening here in America, of course, you have to understand that we are at the moment in the summer, and in the summer people tend to become very heated, especially in the political discourse here. It seems like they love a little bit of riots and revolution in the summer.
A little bit of action.
A bit of action. But
letting
thank you
off
so
some
much.
steam.
Yeah, to blow up some steam. They did it also during the pandemic every now and then. Let's get to blow up some steam. But now we have to understand that I mean, when you are going to actually damage the businesses of people, that is a reality. I mean, I have a friend who had to leave Santa Monica after he had millions of damage, and he had to leave California altogether and go and live in another state because he was making hemp clothes that got stolen during the George Floyd riots, whatever. They set fire also to his business because he was a conservative. I mean, it's just like I hope that that's not the case this summer, and I hope that by bringing the National Guard and the Marines, we can have a more peaceful life here. Take care, guys. All the best, and we see you for the book club. Don't miss it.
Tuesday it is, Leo. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay, guys and girls. Well, that was my Friday hanging out with you. It is now 8:30 in the evening here. And I wish you all a beautiful day, afternoon, evening, wherever in the beautiful world you are. And I will see you all tomorrow with Kathy O'Brien. Yay, everybody. God bless you all. Take care. And don't be good. Goodbye.